Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Buenos días y buenas tardes. Welcome to the Share4Rare End event. We're looking forward to a series of excellent speakers and interviews, followed by engaging questions from you, the rare disease community. My name is Susie M. Baker, and I will be your host for today. And in case you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me via email or just here via the chat. I just want to let you know that this webinar is having live Spanish interpretation. So to switch languages, please click in the interpretation symbol in the taskbar below and select Spanish. So before I hand it over to our VIP, Dr. Loretta Anania, I would like to point out some of the rules and tools we have during the event. The first one is to please have your real name and affiliated organization on screen. And to change it, you can hover over your name in the participant list and then click Rename. Of course, we have space to answer questions from the audience. And to ask a question, you can click on the Q&A button in the taskbar below. Here, you can also upvote existing questions that you want to see answered. And if you want to share any comments, insights, or stories, please put them in the chat. And you can access the chat by clicking on the speak bubble in the taskbar below. So just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded and the link will be shared with you afterwards. And if you want to tweet about this webinar, please do so and use the official hashtag Share4Rare. So here you can see the agenda for today. We start this online meeting with an introduction to the project by Dr. Loretta Anania. This will be followed by an introduction by Begonia Nafria. This will be followed by a keynote by Bettina Rill, where she will talk about patient organizations who are driving research. Next are two testimonials from real users from the platform and from two different rare disease areas. And then we move to the approach, where we will be presenting three key elements of the platform. The tool to promote patient agency in research by Giliosa Spurrier-Benard, the patient advocacy toolkit by me, and the innovative People Like Me tool by John Garrido. After a short break, we will move on with the actual outcome of the research projects, the neuromuscular pilot, by Dr. Michela Guglieri. This will be followed by a presentation by Hugo van Haastert on the learnings and insights in the European data space. We also want to share the learnings from this project in a broader context, which is what Julie will present to us. And then we'll talk about how we will proceed to do rare disease research through citizen science, which will be presented by you by Begonia. Then we arrive at the Q&A, where we will be answering and discussing questions that you've asked in the Q&A. And last but not least, we are inviting our project partners to share their final thoughts on the Share4Rare project before we wrap the event up. So with nothing further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Loretta Anania for the official introduction. Loretta is the program manager at the European Commission, and she is the Directorate General of the Communication Networks, Content and Technologies, aka DJ Connect. Loretta, we're very pleased to hear from you, and the floor is yours.
I wish I were a Director General, but I am not, so I'm just the project officer. But there's a big inflation in titles. No, I was very pleased to have this project, because when I first met Begonia, I was quite impressed that they would have a patient representative. Because when people enter a hospital, usually they're treated like a number. And especially now in the digital age, if you don't have an ID or a number, you probably won't get in, or you won't get your results, or we are moving to a digital environment. But so I thought having a patient-centered approach was something really exceptional. I work in the Next Generation Internet unit, and this unit is about increasing trust in the network as a whole. So eliminating some of the misinformation that happens in social media, some of the dark patterns that impersonate others. Technology can do a lot of things. I went to MIT, so I know what a good hack, enjoyable hack is, but I think we need to get some governance back in the world of data networks. So As you know, the two big items now are the digital and the green transition. It's called the twin transition. But this project was a bit early because it was part of the collective awareness platform for social innovation and sustainability, and putting the social in front of innovation, putting the individual in front of the technology in terms of having more control, and above all, looking in terms of the system of values that makes our society sustainable. This was something that was really wonderful about the CAPS program, of which we had 35 projects, such as yours, and all of them had trials in at least 3 European cities. In total, we had a budget of 75 million euros. And I think it was one of the most enjoyable and advanced programs that I participated in. Unfortunately, it's finished. Our 3 calls are finished. You were very lucky because the calls were always oversubscribed 10 to 1. So it wasn't easy. In fact, some of the people who selected you are in this room today. So they will see the final results of their decision, which was not mine. Huh? This was a very difficult evaluation that you survived. And what was said then was that in most cases, people do not want to share data. People are afraid of giving data to you don't know whom for you don't know what purpose. That is certainly the case with Facebook, which I would never join for those reasons. But what was said in the evaluation was that for rare diseases, this is such an exception in the sense that mainly parents know that because there is no cure and because the number of patients is small, there's not so much of a private investment in some of these very rare diseases. It's really important to share, and parents or caretakers are willing to share data. So this project is also about setting up a platform which is trusted, which is in the interest of the patient, where the doctors are also benefiting from this rich data that comes from citizens, say, sharing their data. So I won't tell you anything about that because the project knows more. What I can tell you is that in the next generation internet, we will have other calls, but they're a little bit less on the social and more on the technology, in particular data sovereignty. I'm very happy to see somebody's going to speak about EU data spaces, which is the continuation. And finally, I'm also very happy because I funded search engines for about 10 years. Don't tell me that we can compete with Google. But in fact, search engines are a way for people to discover on the internet knowledge about their disease, knowledge about well-being, knowledge about patients like me. I mentioned patients like me because that is, of course, a commercial platform where, in addition to finding out the information, you have advertising that are certainly probably not in the patient's interest. So I'm very happy to see that this project was trying to develop an alternative. And that's it. The next generation is 672.5 billion. Where next generation internet is very much on technology components. I know you have the people in Madrid, the hackathons, so some of you will be joining our program later. And on the social part, that will be part of Horizon Europe, which is 5 billion. And I'm very happy because they were delayed quite a lot, but they were approved last week. So the calls will be in October. And thank you very much. I'm all ears. I'd like to see what the project has done. Thank you, Begonia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Loretta. Indeed, over to you, Begonia Nafria from the Hospital Sant Joan de Déu in Barcelona. She's also the project coordinator of Share4Rare.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Loretta. Thank you so much, Suzanne and the whole team. The Share4Rare project has been working along 3 years and a half, hard work, because as Loretta have mentioned, when we are dealing with patients and families living with a rare condition, imagine that they don't have an easy life. In some cases, they are waiting for the diagnosis. In other cases, probably they are waiting to see if there is a future treatment that can improve their quality of life. It's not, an easy wall, but the approach of the Share4Rare project is that, working hand by hand with the patients, we can or we pretend to improve the quality of life of the patients. This is our aim, and this is the direction that we have had along these 3 years and a half. And the method, it's based, in the opportunity to share the experience, to share the data, to share the feelings, and to, create new knowledge thanks to the tools that we have, the internet that can connect people that probably are, very close, but at the same time very far, and analyzing the data with, the capabilities of the technology. I'm not going to be longer because my colleagues will explain in detail different pieces of the project, and at the end, also we have another slot to emphasize the lessons learning. But I want to thank you, all the patients and the families that have been working with us from the very beginning of the project until the end. They have been involved in the co-creation activities of the design of the platform. All the users, patients, families, caregivers that are part of the platform and the different research initiatives. We have at this moment working 8 different projects, 8 different research initiatives. Obviously, thank you to all the partners, because we have different kinds of experience, expertise in the team. And I want to highlight, obviously, the expertise from the patient side. Here you can see which are the experts. The clinical expertise, it's a tandem between the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Center in Newcastle in United Kingdom, and also our institution, San Joan de Déu Research Foundation in Barcelona, Spain. We have the expertise of people working in the social innovation side and communication, the synergies. We have experts in the social impact and in the sustainability of the project, Acerta and Clip Lab. The IT experts, OMADAN and the Universitat Politècnica of Catalunya, and obviously the patients organizations, the World Duchenne Organization and the Melanoma Patient Network. One last comment, this project, as many other things in more than 1 year, has been impacted by the COVID-19. And beyond this, I want to thank you also, all the people that has been working hand by hand with us in an environment and in a moment that it's not easy for everybody. It's a pity not to celebrate this event in a face-to-face format, but I know that people are there and people are willing to help. I'm not going to continue now. I will hand over to Susian and start the final event. Enjoy, and we are here to help in anything that you can need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Begonia, for this introduction of the platform. Grateful to have you. Now, another person we're grateful to have is Bettina Rill, who's the president of the Melanoma Patient Network Europe. And she's one of Share4Rare project partners, as Begonia said. And she will give a keynote presentation on patient involvement in research and why enabling patient organizations to drive their own research is so critical. Bettina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity here to kick off this day or this afternoon with you and speak about a topic that is very, very close to my heart, namely what patient organizations can do actually to not just be the passive participants in research, but actually to drive research. For those who don't know me, my name is Bettina Rill. I founded the Melanoma Patient Network Europe after my husband died of melanoma in 2012. And our community, so you will say melanoma is not rare, and that's absolutely correct. But then we have some rare melanoma subtypes, and we have always been worried about these of our colleagues for whom there were just fewer options. So we were very, very grateful for the opportunity of Share4Rare, because we saw it as filling a gap that we had noted in our own community. So by training, I'm a trained physician. I've studied medicine in Germany and France. I have a PhD in biomedical sciences from the University College London and spent a few years in research. So I have a personal research experience, and that obviously influences how I look at certain things, as you will note. So let's start. I like to pick good ideas from others and run with them. And that's what I would like to do today. Let's start with why. why should patient organization take an active role in research? And then I'm going to walk you a little bit through how that can happen and what we now in Share4Rare have actually concretely done in that space. Because theories are one thing, but actually realizing them is something different. So let's start with the why. Why should we as patients and as patient organizations be involved in research? I look at it as there are two main areas. One is accountability and transparency, and one is better research. Research is effectively funded by our societies. And something that I forgot to mention is that since 2019, I'm also a member of the Cancer Mission Board that is developing recommendations for the European Commission for the next address to cancer. One of the criticisms in the past program was that the impact of the research was unclear, and at the same time, citizens did not realize the value of research and innovation for our societies, which I believe is detrimental for anyone who so desperately needs it, like our patient communities. And Begonia has already alluded to that. We need solutions, we need research. So accountability is a very important part. Transparency towards those for whom that research is supposed to deliver benefit. And then on the other side, there is simply better research. And I already put like little icons on that. In my view, the accountability part is a pull side of research. It is a delivery of the research, a responsibility of the research towards society to be transparent and to be accountable. The other side is a more proactive one. That's what I call the push part from our side. We can push for better research and be part of it and can drive it. And that is, of course, where the challenge is and where also the potential is, because it is important to realize that accountability comes after the fact. Something went right or wrong. Push comes before the fact. Could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Push comes before the fact. So you can shape something. You can be part of the solution, not just complain or hold someone accountable. And that's, of course, I think a much better use of our time, and it avoids waste and lost opportunities. So the accountability I just walked through, this is the pull side, and now we come to the push side. I have actually written this up, why researchers should actually invite this. This is published, it's in one of the Nature journals, you find the free link under there. So what we want from a patient community is speed, and we want research that is relevant to us. Now, of course, how can we even get started? Because it's not quite as easy as it looks. So I apologize that this seems quite full as a graph, but what it basically is that we tried to look at the different types of research. If you just think on top of your head how you could engage in research, you could just participate individually, that's the blue line. You could participate as a community, as a group, the orange line. You could fundraise for research and just hand over a check, gray line. You can participate in a research project, like join a clinical trial. You could also conduct your own research, and we're going to come a little bit to that later, run your own research project or be involved in one research project designed by others. That would be the blue line, the light blue line. You could design your own research project, green. You could simply use research. You could see what's out there and apply it and see whether it does something for your community. And you can influence it. Influencing in the sense of you could participate in prioritization exercises. You can submit feedback to the European Commission. So, for example, we have the Future of Europe, the conference about the future of Europe ongoing. Go on there, leave your mark, tell what you want. Engage with your national funders. That's a way of gaining influence. You can also talk to researchers, tell them what you need, what you expect, what you want. If you now look at the different domains, what each of these come with is, one is the measure of control. How much do you control what type of research is happening? How much effort do you have to put in? How much knowledge do you actually need in order to be able to realize that? How much impact on the desired outcomes will you have? And then last but not least, how much money is it going to cost you? What I want you to take home from that is, and this is not an absolute one, this is something that I did with my colleagues, just like just on top of our heads, but it is a way of thinking about it. Think, if I do this, how much control will it give me? How much will I impact the outcomes? And you will kind of be able to place yourself, and you see that the shapes differ from each other. So that depending of the type of research engagement you choose, you will have to consider different of these domains in for your actions and for your decision. Now, the interesting bit of now comes the blue one. The outline was the one where you conduct your own research. And for those who can't remember it, it is the blue one on the outside. And I'm not sure you can see my cursor, but it is basically the outline of the entire shape. And that is where I believe Share4Rare and this project can actually make a real difference. Because what we have done here is, like, the blue shaded one is this space you would have to cover if you as a patient organization just decided you want to conduct your own piece of research. And that can be a survey, or that can be something more proactive. You basically have to cover this entire space. Our ambition with this platform is to reduce the side on the effort you have to invest, the knowledge it takes to get started, and also the cost, but while having the impact on outcomes and the control about the research project. So the limited surface is in a way what we try to achieve. So an easy access and easier getting started, because something that I believe is really, really important, and that is something that I have reflected on often enough as a researcher passing to the patient side when my husband was diagnosed. What you think matters and is important when you're not personally affected is different from what you consider important and relevant when you are the patient. You have a very different view on what type of speed is required and how successful you want the process to be. As a researcher, you get incentivized on publications. As a patient, a paper does not help you. You need solutions for your situation. So you see, or you look at the research process in an entirely different way, and with the aim of getting a different outcome out of it. If you're able to actively participate, you create prototypes, you start shaping the research environment in a sense that is more relevant for patients. And this is what the ambition behind this research feature is, to actually allow patient organizations to get started, to conduct a piece of research that highlights what really matters to us. And once the first prototype is there, it is easier to get a second and a third project and to influence on top of this concrete research project. Now, we have been thinking about what would be value, what type of value could we offer to a patient organization? Now, we have already heard the importance of data, also about data security. Having your data held in a secure hospital setting, medical grade security, if you like, is of enormous value. We don't want to endanger our patients by having data in an insecure place. We have already heard from Loretta about financial models that conflict actually with the original message of why we want to conduct research. So there is no financial conflict of interest in this platform. There is a proper project, like a process for the project in place, where any project proposal has to undergo ethics approval and a support process for that, actually. Research participants, and that's a big problem for patient organizations. Anyone can start a survey, but do you really know that the people who participate are who they say they are? Or do you have someone trying to influence your outcomes? The ability to validate who participates in your project is of enormous value to communities like us. You want to have feedback to your participants. People want to know, what do the others say? So an automated feedback, of course, in an aggregated way that respects privacy, is something that we think is of value to our community, because it's not just asking people to give you something, but to provide something directly back to them. So a direct feedback loop. And of course, it's not quite so easy to get started. So having support in data analysis, and we're going to hear one of our colleagues present more about that in a bit, is really of value to someone who doesn't have a background in data analysis. And of course, in the future, we would like to have a fully supported research feature for communities that would hopefully allow to grow not just your own, but interact with other patient communities and learn for them, so that we can all move faster together. And we know that this project is called Share4Rare, but actually this is not just of value to the rare community. We have actually decided to pilot this very research feature in our non-rare part of the melanoma community, just because there are so many more of us, and just to see whether this could actually work. And also with the intention that if we find something that works, we would have a tool ready that someone from our rare colleagues could simply use and run with and wouldn't have to develop from scratch. So if you see the light purple one, this is what we have developed and what is currently piloted. So there's a research feature and independent design that is a surface how to access the research project. We have designed our own research project. So this is the ongoing, that's in gray here, MPNE pilot. And the outer side is what is potential, what we could be developing in order to support patient organizations, to help formulate research questions, a situational analysis, how to basically reach out in order to help with recruitment for your study, but also analysis and publication. So I'm very proud to report that we launched the burden of melanoma at the beginning of May. We launched it actually in 3 parallel languages, so not only in English, but also in French and Romanian, to in parallel test the reach out to different communities. I must say, we couldn't believe that we were actually so accurate in our prediction. We had predicted we would be able to recruit 180 participants in 2 weeks. And we actually recruited 179. We had it on the morning of week 2, so we were spot on with our prediction. So we're now undergoing the following steps, but the first part has really worked. We have translated the entire surface. We have tagged times for every process. So if someone else wants to reach out and wants to have it in another language, we can tell you exactly how long these things take and what it takes to basically not just have your own survey, but the entire surface of the research feature in the language that you desire and that is approachable to your audience. Because what we have noted when it comes to feedback, and especially to written text, we want to see this and we want to be able to express ourselves in our native language. It is still closer to us, especially when it comes to personal, really impact on our life. This type of information is very difficult to formulate in a different language that's not your own. So the ambition behind that was to conduct research actually close to the patient in the language that is the one of the patient. And we've done this by ourselves. So we have thought about a process how one could even crowdsource this, so that a patient community can do this without needing the professional help and the cost of having to go through a professional translation. So we were like, it was a lot of work. It was way more than we thought and anticipated, but so far, as you can tell, I'm very excited. And let's see what we have now gotten out from there. And with that, I would very much like to thank you for your attention. I think we had all wished to be together in person and end this project in how we had started it, because in the end, we all personally affected. We care about this because it has affected our lives. So unfortunately, just only virtual, but very welcome here. And thank you again for your attention. Over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Bettina. This is great. And I'm also saying this on behalf of the World Duchenne organization, as our community also learned a lot from how you push specific research and also spot fake science. So again, audience, if you have any questions to any of our speakers, please ask them in the Q&A and we will answer them later on. And let's go on with Lucy Imber. She's from the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Center, who will introduce you to one of the testimonials that we gathered.
Thanks, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. So we've been very lucky that Jeff Galudi, who is the father and carer of a patient here at Newcastle with CMT, has agreed to be interviewed for the event and has provided a testimonial about the platform and about the new muscular pilot. He and his son have been involved previously. They contributed to the blog, so they're very keen to help with Share4Rare. So it's lovely that he's been involved, and it'll be great to hear what he has to say.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm the father to Jackson. Jackson is a young man with congenital myasthenia syndrome, CMS. Jackson was diagnosed with CMS when he was 12 years old. Previous to that, when Jackson was around 3 years old. He was diagnosed with a general muscular myopathy. For his congenital myasthenia syndrome, Jackson takes ephedrine hydrochloride. He takes 30 milligrams twice a day, so that's 60 milligrams in total. The ephedrine hydrochloride has had a big impact on Jackson and helps him immensely to get through his general day. Due to his condition, Jackson suffers chronic fatigue. He has muscle weakness in his upper and lower limbs and has a limb girdle weakness. He also has a lower than average lung capacity. The lower than average lung capacity greatly affects Jackson's ability to project himself and be heard in large groups, especially with peers who at his age are quite boisterous and loud. When Jackson was first diagnosed with CMS, it was difficult to find information on his condition. The internet, this was when Jackson was 12, so the internet back then wasn't quite the internet it is now. And a lot of the information that I received myself through my own internet researches tended to be medical journals published for professionals and the language that they use in their specialities. It was due to groups like the John Walton Research Centre that I first received information that I could digest and understand regarding a condition like CMS. This was very useful in allowing me to better understand CMS. I believe Share4Rare offers a community hub for people to come together where we can share our experiences, our concerns and suggestions to offer support and alleviate fears that we can often have as both parents and patients.
Well, that was the interview by Jeff. Thank you very much, Lucy, for the introduction. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your interview. And I would like to hand on to the second testimonial, which is by Sandra. And for that, I want to ask all the English speakers to toggle to the Spanish channel because this interview will be done in Spanish. So if you toggle to the Spanish channel, you can then hear the English interpretation. So if you hover over the interpretation one in the taskbar, you can select Spanish. And in the meantime, I will pull up the interview by Sandra.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Sandra Iglesias y soy la presidenta de Objetivo Diagnóstico, la Asociación de Personas sin Diagnóstico de España. Nosotros empezamos en Share4Rare al principio de todo con el proyecto, ayudando a elaborarlo, y después de que empezasen con los dos proyectos principales que hicieron, se vieron que a la hora de registrarse las personas, el número más amplio de personas que había registrado eran las personas sin diagnóstico, y por ello se empezó con el proyecto de personas sin diagnóstico. Es por ello que es importante que la gente se registre y rellene la documentación para poder así tener más amplia información de cuántas personas realmente están en esta situación y así poder llegar a ayudarles a ellos. ¿Qué significa la demora en el diagnóstico? La demora en el diagnóstico, en verdad, como se está diciendo, no son 5 años, que es lo que tenemos reflejado, sino que el 20% de las personas llega a tardar más de 10 años o incluso están con 50 años y aún no tienen diagnóstico. El hecho de no tener un diagnóstico, ¿qué implica? Implica que afecta a toda la unidad familiar, no solamente a la persona afectada, sino es toda la familia la que queda afectada, porque cansa tanto físicamente, económicamente, psicológicamente, en una situación de que la familia es uno de ellos, tiene que dejar de trabajar, atender a la persona afectada, acompañarle pues a los peregrinajes de la búsqueda, ¿no? de qué le pasa, ir de hospital en hospital, necesitan ir a diferentes especialistas y como por ejemplo mi hijo pues de 8 a 10 especialistas diferentes y eso implica pues eso, ir a muchas citas médicas, muchas terapias y es un desgaste pues realmente bastante amplio para toda la familia. también no tener diagnóstico, pensar que esa enfermedad va evolucionando y tú no sabes realmente lo que le está cómo está afectando a esa persona. La importancia de la investigación, pues como ya lo sabes, es la base de todo. Creo que en la época que estamos, que hemos pasado una pandemia, se ha podido demostrar aún más lo importante que es la investigación, el saber qué. Pues creo que ahora más que nunca nos tendríamos que todos unir un poco las fuerzas y realmente pues ayudar a la investigación y que tenga más fuerza que nunca. Muchas gracias por la invitación al evento y ya sabéis que aquí estamos encantados en ayudar otra vez. ¿De acuerdo? Muchas gracias y adiós.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for sharing your story. I would like to ask all the English speaker understanding people to switch back to the original channel, and then we can move on to the next part of this end webinar for Share4Rare, which is the V2A2 tool to promote patient agency. Now, one of them, this is a brilliant tool that will promote patient agency, as it says, and Julio Saspiria Bernard from the Melanoma Patient Network Europe will tell you more about it.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Really glad to speak to you all. My name is Gilly Spurrier Bernard. I am a carer of a stage 4 melanoma patient, and I work with Bettina Rull as part of the consortium members of the project. And we developed a tool which we'd been working on for a while to try and help patients, and as Loretta mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of rubbish out there, to find quality information on their disease area and anything they're trying to find out. And having seen the impact of scientific knowledge on our own network, we were really keen to share this, and it's many years of educating that we've been doing it and striving for agency particularly. And we think that those patients with rare conditions who are not so lucky as we are to have a supportive community behind them and often feel very isolated because they're so rare. And also their data is extremely sparse, so it's even more important. And the shadow of pseudoscience, which is one of my big bêtes noires, is something that's much harder to ignore when there's very little data around. And as we've developed this community at MP&E with real research engagement, and we've seen that from our selection of our pilots, how we managed to fill people very quickly because they're so motivated to take part in research. And we have a few things on our forums that we really insist upon. We insist on scientific information on anything that they shared on the forum that must be referenced, and that the network must provide continuous training on how to access and read scientific articles. And we train also against pseudoscience. And it quickly became apparent that Share4Rare would require patients to understand the value and importance of this research, particularly with the research feature that we were so proud of, really. And we didn't have an organically grown scientific culture with Share4Rare. We were starting from scratch. So we knew it wasn't going to be easy to transfer this to a new community. So the V2A2 tool became our effort to sort of codify what we'd learned about effective patient information in a scientific context for real rare research. It's a multi-purpose tool that can be used either directly to review existing patient information material or to educate about the 4 domains that we've identified as highly relevant, which is validity, verifiability, accessibility, and agency. And that's why we call it the V2A2, to remind us of these 4 essentials. You can see from this diagram, there's some tension in this tool, really, because validity and verifiability stand as a kind of, against, if you like, accessibility on one hand and agency on the other hand. And so we need to carefully balance this for optimal results when we're looking at patient information. Because an author might be tempted to sort of omit technical terms and references to make it sort of more accessible, but technical terms are really vital to sort of searching for correct information and really key to avoiding fake news, while omission of references also prevents the reader from verifying the trustworthiness of the information. And also the accessibility. You know, we use this information to also know who our experts are, especially in the rare space. And also, you know, if you have a really highly referenced text, it's very, very well verifiable, but it's really it negatively affects the readability. It's really a pain to see references attached all over the place. And this reduces the accessibility to a text, which curtails, you know, a person's ability to carry on with what they're trying to learn. And we don't want to do that. We really want to increase this agency. Let me go one more step. So we're going to go through a little bit what the V2A2 looks like. Obviously, you can see it's branded, and we were very keen to make sure that this was available to everyone in the way we published it. In addition to the documentation, we've also created a V2A2 user guide and this 20 item checklist to rate texts. Items are scored for the presence or absence of the required elements, and then the positive ratings can be summarized. So you get a score of 20 out of 20, you've pretty much got the perfect patient text. We now use this tool to self-evaluate educational content that we produce. And if you really want consistent results, it's better to do it three or four people, because there are things in there that are quite subjective, and to get a good picture, you need to have several people doing it, maybe with several different languages or not understanding English as their prime language. So and overall, it's intended as a guide, not as an absolute measure, and it's proven equally useful as an educational tool to illustrate the factors that you should be looking for in text that you look for, that you're using, and also it could positive or negatively influence the educational value for the patients, and we want a positive effect. So the 20 items that we've covered, we've got. I'm going to go through just a few of them because we don't really have the time to do it all. Validity, you know, is the content complete and accurate? Yeah, is the review date scheduled? Super important. This is totally dangerous if patients are looking at information that's several years old. Verifiable. Are all the claims supported by references? Yeah, people need to be able to follow through what the process is for this research being classified as good research. References should be easy to trace. The name of the authors should be there. This is particularly important if you want to find an expert in your field. And this will really help with the agency as well, because knowing your own research community is particularly relevant in rare diseases. Professional or other credentials should be stated. Then we go on to accessibility. We really need it to be accessible to people. Most people haven't had a scientific background. It needs to be simple, abbreviations explained, and unnecessary technical jargon removed, because we've seen that, you know, text speak in medical texts now is actually worse than it was in the 1950s. So we're actually getting worse. So this is something that all of us as a community need to address, including researchers. Relevant technical terms should always be explained. We do not want simplicity. You can oversimplify such that then it's no use to you when you want to search or when you want to speak to a clinician. You need the both. So terms need to be explained. Then there's also structural things, how to structure a text better, shorter paragraphs, not these great long-winded things. And then agency. Agency is really important to us, and we actually prefer it to patient empowerment, because patient empowerment implies that you are being allowed to be empowered by someone else instead of taking responsibility and taking charge of it yourself. So we like the term agency. We can see, you know, the text needs to be respectful of the reader. We do not want references to the patient, someone on a trial, as if they weren't a living being, and if they were going to read these things and feel like they were just a guinea pig, which is something that we often have in research, in problems in communicating research. And for patient knowledge, it really means protection, and this is the kind of the thing I want to end on really, is that patients need protection, and knowledge, reading the right text is what gives it to you. Education is the key, and V2A2 is the accelerator to that knowledge. I've put this slide here because we've tested this tool. We tested it at one of our conferences on pediatric melanoma texts, and it's really important to, and we've actually then updated it to version 1.1 based on some of that testing. This is published, you can use it. We want people to read it, use it, brand it for yourselves on according to the certain rules, but please take advantage of it, and we think it will be very useful for most of the rare community. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Jilly, for sharing this tool. And it would be great if you can link to this article in the chat so the people already have the resource with them.
It's at the bottom of the page of the slide, but that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, well then let's move on to the next presentation, which is my presentation, because I want to talk about another tool that is, I think, unmissable if you're a rare disease patient advocate, and that is the Rare Disease Toolkit for Patient Advocacy. Because if you're a member or a family member or a person affected by a rare disease, you might be interested in raising more awareness on your specific condition. And this, of course, can be anything from helping others where to find reliable information, all the way up to setting up your own patient organization in your country. And advocacy is especially essential in rare diseases to raise awareness and to make sure that it's noticed. So that's why we built the Share4Rare Patient Advocacy Toolkit for you. And it's made by established patient organizations, and we have contributions from researchers, business developers, journalists, you name it. And the toolkit is available on the Share4Rare website in English and in Spanish for free. And it's absolutely jam-packed with tools and resources on getting started or leveling up your patient advocacy efforts. So here you can see a breakdown of the chapters, and it starts with an overview of all the things we have in the toolkit. And then we move on to advocacy essentials, the basics, really. Here you can find information on what a patient advocate exactly is, what it does, what you need to get started, and where and when you can advocate for. Then we have the patient advocacy strategy. Now, this chapter can be used to set a strong base and a sense of direction for your effort and how to use your resources. And it helps you to map your environment, to do an analysis on your weaknesses and strengths, and how to define your goals so they can be measured and achieved, of course. We also have a separate chapter on communication. And this gives you tools on where to find your target audience and make sure that you don't miss anything, and how to define your messages. And for example, also which type of communication channel you can use best for which target audience. And next to this, it also has some templates on how to write a cover story, how to create a press kit, or how to set up a successful pitch. And of course, research is an important part of the toolkit. And it's not only essential for progressing in medicine, it also covers every area that affects patients, the full healthcare system. So here you can find guidance on how to access medical literature, but also how to publish your own research results and how to join community advisory boards to include the patient perspective in clinical research. Now we also have education, which is also important in patient advocacy. So here you can find a summary of all available rare disease advocacy programs, such as the Eurode Summer School, the European Patients Forum Academy, it's called EUPATI, and other training toolkits that might be useful. And I think the one valuable thing of this whole toolkit is the vast amount of templates and resources that you can download and tweak to your preference. So you can find a huge list of regulatory resources, for example, on how to handle a conflict of interest, for information about pharmacovigilance. We have a list of additional advocacy resources for non-profits, for campaigning, for specific Rare Disease Day, but also for fundraising resources and how to write grants and how to set up a fundraising effort. And next to this, we also have additional resources that are not rare disease specific, such as toolkits from the World Health Organization or by the Children's Cancer Cause. So to summarize, whether you're talking to like a patient or a healthcare professional or your neighbor, the government, a politician, media company, this toolkit really helps you with the right skills and materials to truly make an impact. So please just check out the chapters and see which parts are useful for you. And I'd also like to mention this complete toolkit is available in Spanish, so also the tools and resources. So I hope that piqued your interest. If you have any questions or suggestions regarding this, please reach out to me in the chat and I'll connect with you. Now, another thing that I'd like to mention, and I'm going to give a live demonstration of that if everyone is okay with that, is the Share4Rare library. If I can find it. Yep, there we go. So this is something you can also find in English and both in Spanish. And these are rare disease chapters. As you can see, this is our library. And here you can see chapters, for example, on leukemia, on congenital muscular dystrophies, and so on. So in total, we have many, many rare disease chapters. So if you click on a chapter, you can find all the information written in a reliable and understandable way. So basically what we did is we written these chapters per rare disease and we had them checked by people, by patients and by researchers. So we tried to make sure that this whole chapter is for everyone understandable. And you can read here more about the signs and symptoms, the diagnosis, the treatment and therapies, but also clinical trial and disease management. So as you can see here, we got every chapter and this will be updated. As you can see, it's filled with information. We got videos, we got extra links, we got pictures. And this is a really useful tool because it's both available in English and in Spanish, but it also contains reliable information. And I think that this is one of the many, many points that is sometimes quite hard to find in the rare disease area. So I'm going to put the link to this one in the chat as well. And I'm also going to hand over the talking stick to John Garrido, who will give a presentation on the next tool, which is the People Like Me. John, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay. So, well, good afternoon, everyone. From the beginning of the project, we have aimed at building a community in which patients, caregivers, researchers, and clinicians as well all collaborate to increase the knowledge about rare diseases. Since the platform went public in March 2019, the number of registered users has been increasing steadily, such that as of today, Share4Rare is a platform with potential for worldwide impact, with a diverse population of users indeed. Also in terms of age, and a diverse population of patients as well, with two clearly distinguishable patient groups in terms of age, probably representing differential prevalence of the diseases as a function of patient age. What can be observed in this slide, with some of the diseases in the platform represented in the vertical axis, including the case of the undiagnosed group, and the age of the patients in the horizontal axis. Then, besides demographic information, in Share4Rare, we decided to use a structured clinical information in the shape of ontologies to characterize patients, aiming at deep phenotyping, which, among other aspects, includes a comprehensive representation of the clinical characteristics of the patients. In order to do so, we use ontologies to represent both diseases on one side and symptoms on the other. This way, using structured symptom annotations, we obtain structured representations of patients that can be compared in order to infer meaningful relationships between patients. Taking this into account, and in order to build an algorithm, we can ask ourselves a question that is, given the heterogeneous data we have at hand, how do we define similarity between patients? For instance, by symptoms, or is it by disease? Maybe taking into account some notion of geographic proximity, maybe using a combination of different dimensions of the data. In Share4Rare, we decided that to take advantage of the richness of the data we have was the best option. So then we take different dimensions at once. This way, the People Like Me algorithm combines inter-patient similarities in terms of phenotypes and diseases, and smoothes this similarity by a notion of geographic distance of the users, and then builds a meaningful representation of the patient community using this heterogeneous data, allowing to incorporate additional information such as links to patient organizations, as you can see here, so that lists of most similar users on one hand and relevant patient organizations can be provided to a given user. Consequently, the People Like Me algorithm is at the foundation of the functionalities that we use in Share4Rare. On one side, it is used to build the People Like Me map. It also allows to relate users with similar clinical profiles between them, and also users with relevant patient organizations. On the other side, it guides questions to users that will likely be interested in them or otherwise capable of answering them. And finally, it serves as a way to help undiagnosed patients by putting them in relation with users with similar clinical profiles, and also as well with patient organizations. Here I will show a brief example about how the inter-patient symptom relationships is able to capture meaningful disease relationships. So we construct this structure using symptoms. So for instance, we have here a node, a ball, which represents a disease, which is narcolepsy type 1, as represented in the Orphanet rare disease database. and it can be linked with, for instance, 2 patients in the Share4Rare community, here shown in blue, such that, for instance, we see how one of the linked patients also declares suffering from narcolepsy type 1. And then following this logic, we can connect, for instance, undiagnosed patients represented by these yellowish balls with diseases and patients in the patient community in Share4Rare using just clinical characteristics of the patient and other data that we may add or we may incorporate in the future. So in essence, with our work in Share4Rare, we, as a technical partner in the project, aimed at developing a community that is able to build value upon the knowledge the patients and families have about their condition, by bringing them together and also putting them in contact with patient organizations at different levels. So that in conclusion, in Share4Rare, we are proposing different technological solutions to increase the knowledge and awareness about rare diseases in an effort to bring their position and impact closer to the situation of the most prevalent diseases. So that's it. Thank you very much. And over to you again, Susian.
Thank you very much, John, for this explanation about the people like me too. We're off for a short break. I'm inviting you to stretch your legs and grab some tea or coffee or something else. Let's be back at 20 past the full hour, where we will be talking about Share4Rare's findings in terms of the project and the research. So see you all back in 15 minutes. All right, it is time after the break. It's good to have you back. I hope you had all a lovely break. Let's continue with the event. And it's time to continue in particular with Share4Rare and in particular with the project's learnings. And for that, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Michela Guglieri from the John Walton Muscular Dystrophy Research Center, who was one of the initiators of the neuromuscular research pilot. Dr. Guglieri, we're all ears and we'll love to hear what you have to say. I can see your screen, but I'm afraid you're unmuted. Oh, no, there you are.
Be fine now, sorry.
All perfect. Thank you, Michela.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving the opportunity to present a little bit the background of the neuromuscular pilot study that we ran through the Share4Rare platform and some initial results. So first of all, just to introduce the project itself, we wanted to use in a way the Share4Rare platform as an opportunity to help us to better understand employment and educational opportunities for patients and their care with neuromuscular diseases. I think that this is an important aspect. We need to consider that for the majority of adult or patient, employment and education play a significant role in the daily life and can have a significant impact on quality of life and in general well-being. The way that we developed this pilot study is through a short survey that aims really to test the concept of using the Share4Rare platform for conducting research projects that are specifically for interest for patients. And this specific pilot study was directed to try to better understand health economy technology assessment, which could have an impact for drug approval. And this is because the neuromuscular field over the last few years have seen an increased number of clinical trial and potential new therapeutic approaches, with some of them moving into approval process, or some of them expected to reach that point in the upcoming years. And then it's becoming more evident that the current methodology used for health technology assessment might not work for rare diseases such as neuromuscular diseases. The survey is open to all people registered to the Share4Rare platform, and they need to have a confirmed diagnosis of a neuromuscular diseases, and is open to both adult patient and their carer. As I mentioned, the background of why we did these pilot studies, because over the neuromuscular field is probably one of the fields that have seen an increased number of research and new drug development projects over the last 10 years. In general, patients with neuromuscular diseases has experienced a great improvement in care and in access to clinical trials over the past 10 years. There are new potential therapeutic approaches that are tested in clinical trial, and some of them, as I mentioned, have already received ethical approval from regulatory authorities and can be prescribed in clinic. Regardless, the great increase in our knowledge about the disease and about the care for the disease, still very little known about the impact of neuromuscular diseases on an important aspect of daily life, such as education and employment. And this, we know that has an impact not only for the patient, but also for the carers, especially in neuromuscular diseases often required some partial or full-time care in place. So the objective of this pilot study was to better understand the impact of rare neuromuscular diseases on employment and educational opportunities for patients and family living with rare neuromuscular diseases. But also within the context of Share4Rare, the pilot study was developed really to build a connection between different neuromuscular diseases and communities. One unique opportunity that Share4Rare offers compared to existing infrastructure in neuromuscular diseases is access to a large and wide group of patients with different forms of neuromuscular diseases, different functional status, and living in different countries. And this is really a unique opportunity to understand which factor can impact aspects of daily living for patients with rare neuromuscular diseases. The way that we've conducted the pilot is to develop, as I mentioned, 2 questionnaires. One was directed to patients and one to caregivers. The questionnaire for patient was directed for adult patient age 18 years and older, and consisting of 10 questions. The questionnaire could have been answered by the patient himself or by a carer, but when the carer completed the questionnaire, was on the behalf of the patient. The caregiver questionnaire, again directed to adult caregivers and only including 3 questions. This is a pilot study, and we do not want to add too much burden to the patient or their caregivers, but wanted to develop a research project that provides some information which could help to understand which kind of question could be then further developed in a more systematic study. The questions that were developed for the patient included some information about their functional status, whether they were able to walk independently or with assistance. And we thought that this could have been an important aspect and wanted to explore whether the functional status could have an impact on employment and education. We asked about the current education and employment status. We asked about the highest degree or level of school attended as, again, one of the possible contributing factors. And we also specifically ask whether the neuromuscular disease results in a change in the work or study status, whether it has an impact in the decision made or an impact in the employment status once the patient started working. We ask about the care in place, whether the patient needed to, how did the patient go to work or to school, and whether they were required any care, full-time or part-time, and who provided this care. And all of these aspects were really investigated to try to understand the relationship between these different components. Just to give an example, when you ask about the current education and employment status, We give a series of options, which include the preschool age, student, employment, volunteer worker, homemaker, unemployed or retired or other, and always give the possibility to add information. But once they answered this question, we also asked if they were employed, for example, we wanted to know if they were working full-time, part-time or self-employed. And if they were unemployed, whether they were stopping working because of the muscle condition, when they were unable to find a job or not looking for a job related or unrelated to their neuromuscular condition. Again, when we look into the impact of the neuromuscular disease on work and status, we ask about whether they, if there was an impact or no, and if there was an impact, what was the effect, whether make change from a paid full-time to a part-time, from a paid work to unemployment, or full-time to part-time school, or whether they needed to leave the education as a result of the disease. When we ask about the level of care needed, we ask whether there was no care, part-time, full-time, and details. And we also wanted to have a better understanding, because it could have implication in health economy assessment on who provided this care and whether there were any correlation between the functional status or countries or the disease itself with these different aspects. The question for the carers focus on their relationship with the patient, and also regarding their current employment educational status, and whether also for them the employment educational status has to change in view of them being a carer of a patient with a chronic neuromuscular disease. So far, I'm presenting just the provisional data coming from the patient questionnaire. The majority were completed by adult patients, and in some cases, in about 30% of the cases, were completed by another relative, in the majority of the cases, a mother or a father. 76% of the patients completed the questionnaire were ambulant, and 24% were non-ambulatory at the time of completion of the questionnaire. We ask about their status, about whether they're single, married, or in a stable relationship, divorce or withdrawn or preschool age, and this was the distribution, with the largest component being single, following by married and or in a stable relationship. We then wanted to look about the employment status, and this was the distribution where 5 patients were in the preschool age. Then there was an equal distribution between student and employed, was a small group being a volunteer worker or homemaker, and 18% were unemployed and 20% were retired. We then look a little bit in the specificity of, as I mentioned, the characterization of their employment status. In particular, we look into between the cohort that responded that were employed. The majority were part-time employer, followed by full-time and self-employed. We'll then look into the people who were unemployed. And it was interesting that 50% of the cases reported that they had to stop because of the disease. 40% reported that they were unable to find a job because of their neuromuscular diseases. And 10% they were not looking for a job because of their underlying muscle condition. We look into their retirement status, I do apologize, and about the majority of the cases who required early retirement because of their neuromuscular diseases. We need to consider that neuromuscular diseases are progressive diseases, and this is therefore not completely unexpected. And really a minority of cases reach retirement age. There was no clear correlation between the ambulatory status and the cause of their retirement, although the patient that reached retirement age was ambulatory at the time of completion of the questionnaire. We then again explore whether the disease results in a change in the work or state or study status for which a patient or person they were caring for. I would say that this was relatively equally distributed, with about 50% reported that has an impact and about 50% reported that did not have an impact. Among the groups that reported an impact of their muscle diseases on their work or study status, the majority reported that they come from a pay employment to unemployed. Some of them reported from a full-time to part-time, and in one case there was in two cases there was no change sector, that the patient could not work in the sector that he was studying for because of his underlying muscle condition. Regarding the living status, about 20% live alone, and the majority of them were ambulant at the time of completion of the questionnaire, but some of them requiring some part-time care. The non-ambulatory patient reported to require the full-time care. 44% of the patients reported that they were living with the parents, and 35% with a partner, wife, or husband. And only in one case, the patient was living with a carer that was not a family member. I thought it was interesting to see that across the full cohort, 60% of the patients require some care, in about relatively equally distributed between full-time care or 24 hours care and part-time care. Only in 15% of the cases was reported that the care was provided by professional services. And in that case, 60% required a full-time and 40% required part-time. In all other cases, the care was provided by a family member. When we look at the initial result of the carer questionnaire, we have only 20 questionnaires completed. Of these, 16 were employed, the majority of which were full-time, 2 were homemaker, 1 unemployed, and 1 student. And 8 carers reported that the disease affected the person they care for, affect their employment status, where 12 reported that they did not have any impact. As part of the neuromuscular pilot study, we also have collected some information about the impact of the disease in their ability to deliver in a way the work or the other activities as expected. And in about 60% of the patients reported that their muscle condition impacted their ability to complete work, study-related activity over the previous 4 weeks. And interesting, almost 40% of the patients reported that their emotional problems that were related to the neuromuscular diseases impacted their ability to work or to conduct other activity or daily living. The impact was reported as slightly in 43% of the cases, quite a bit in 24, moderate in 20, and an extreme impact of their emotional or physical status on their ability to perform work or other activity in 13% of the cases. So the main finding, I think, that was that definitely neuromuscular diseases has an impact on educational and employment status for the affected person, but also for the person caring for them. The functional status means the ambulatory or non-ambulatory status not necessarily correlate with the study or employment status. It was also interesting to see that from initial observation, the care is mainly provided by family members, and only minority of the cases use professional services. And the physical and emotional impact of muscle diseases affect the patient's ability to work and other activities. And I think that these are important findings that could really address justify further research in the field, and could have an impact in the way that the care is provided and inform national health system as well as regulators. So as a main, the next step is, first of all, we want to complete the analysis of all completed questionnaire and demonstrate whether the initial findings are confirmed. We want to further explore correlation between the different variables that have been collected and review the quality of life data and the correlation with the functional and employment status. And we also want to understand whether there is any trend that we can identify between the functional status, a specific diagnosis, or geographical differences that could explain this observation, and therefore the requirement to extend the research on larger cohorts. And with this, I just say thank you for listening, and happy to receive any question later on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guglieri. That was very interesting. And I already saw that Elisa put the link to the neuromuscular research pilot in the chat in both English and Spanish. So thank you for that, Elisa. Again, I'd like to ask our audience that if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will come back to them. Now, our next presentation is from someone outside of the Share4Rare consortium. He's a strategic advisor in digital and in artificial intelligence, and is working for the DG Sante for the European Commission. We've invited him to share his perspective on European data, given the fact how incredibly fast this landscape has changed over the project's lifetime. So I'm honored to introduce him, partly because I'm the only one able to pronounce his name correctly. I would like to welcome Hugo van Haastert. We're looking forward to hearing from your presentation, which I will pull up right now.
Thank you so much, Susie-Anne, and it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me and for giving me the opportunity to tell you more about all the work that's going on in the European Commission in the area of digital health. Indeed, my name is Hugo van Haastert. I work in the Unit B3 of DG Santé, which is the Health Directorate of the European Commission. Next slide, please. So when it comes to rare diseases and digital health, these are two important priorities for the European Commission. When it comes to rare diseases, already a lot of effort is being put into promoting the further improvement of healthcare for patients with rare disease. We have different programs that are in place, different initiatives. Here are just a few that have been listed, such as, of course, the European Reference Networks, but also the EJPRD, ERICA, and the ERDRI, which I will elaborate on shortly. And then also there will be another important initiative that we're working on right now, which is called the European Health Data Space. The European Health Data Space is a legislative proposal that we are drafting right now that will look at all the different aspects of health data and digital health across the EU. And of course, given that these two topics are both priorities for the European Commission, it's very important for us to make sure that there is plenty of synergy between the two. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the initiatives that the European Commission supports to help patients with rare diseases, one very important example is the European Joint Programme on Rare Diseases. And also with us in this meeting is a colleague of mine who is very much involved in this topic as well. So perhaps if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Myself and my colleague Christina will be happy to answer them. And as you can see here, the EJPRD focuses on quite a number of topics, but it also has, if you look at Pillar 2, P2, then you'll see that there are also different topics related to digital health. When it comes to data and resources, when it comes to making data fair, and by fair we mean findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Because really, if you want to, if you want to help patients with rare diseases, you must make use of all the digital opportunities that are out there. And absolutely, innovation, IT, digital health can help advance treatment, can help advance research and innovation, and therefore can enhance the healthcare that we can provide to patients with rare diseases. Next slide, please. Another couple of initiatives that are also relevant and important to mention here are of course, the ERNs, the 24 reference networks that currently exist across the EU that have been created some years ago, and that are a beautiful example of how the EU and how the European Commission can promote better healthcare for patients with rare diseases. We have also the newly established ERICA, which is a coordination and support action specifically geared towards rare disease research, which will further invest and promote the use of digital tools to help patients with rare diseases. And we also have the ERDRI, which is the European resource for rare disease patients, where we provide an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure. There is the European Directory of Registries, there is a central metadata repository, and also a tool to help you pseudonymize, because obviously the EU is also very proud of the legislation to protect our privacy, the GDPR. And in order to be able to do research on health data, it's necessary to anonymize or pseudonymize the data to make sure that you fall within the remits of the GDPR. So what we've done at the European Commission is that we have developed solutions to do just that. Next slide, please. To go and dive a bit into the European health data space, I will try to explain to you what the focus is of the legislation, because the legislation is quite ambitious and it's quite broad. It looks at promoting better healthcare, better policymaking, and better research and innovation. And it does so on a number of levels. So of course you have the legal aspects and the governance aspects to make sure that there are rules in place to protect patients, but also to help healthcare providers and researchers to make the most out of health data. A separate strand of work is that of the quality of data, because it's very important that the data that is collected is done in such a fashion that it's reusable, that it can serve other purposes. Another important aspect is that of the infrastructure. We see that in member states and in regions across the EU, infrastructure already exists or sometimes is lacking. And for us, the big challenge at the European level is to make sure that the infrastructure is connected in such a way that it serves all the patients to the level that they need. And this applies both to the primary use of health data, which is the use of health data for the providing of care, but also the secondary use of data, which is when you reuse health data, for instance, for research purposes. And lastly, another aspect is that of capacity building. As I said, in some member states, infrastructure is not yet in place, or perhaps this is the case for certain regions in the member states, and there the EU lends a helping hand. So we invest in capacity building, we help member states, we help regions to develop their policies, to develop the legislation, to put in place the infrastructure that is necessary to help the patients. Next slide, please. So the European health data space is a piece of legislation that doesn't stand alone. It's part of the broader legislation that, of course, is already in place. So you have the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive, which promotes the access to healthcare across borders in the EU. You have the Data Governance Act, which is currently being reviewed by the Council and by the European Parliament, which lays down rules when it comes to data. We have the also newly launched AI legislation, which looks at the use of artificial intelligence. And this too, of course, could potentially bring benefits, but also risks to society, which is why the Commission has put forward legislation. And of course, as I already mentioned, the GDPR, which protects our privacy. So these 4 different pieces of legislation provide the context within which the European health data space is being drafted. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we're looking at in the European health data space is to make sure that patients and healthcare providers have sufficient access to health data across borders in an interoperable digital format. So this is one example where you can see that a patient, perhaps a patient from Lithuania or from Latvia, would be traveling to Belgium, and then, for some reason they end up in the hospital, And then, of course, it would be wonderful if the doctors and the nurses at the hospital in Belgium would be able to also access the data that is still available in the country of origin, for instance, Latvia or Lithuania. So this infrastructure is something that we are developing right now, and it involves also the connecting of existing infrastructures across the EU. Next slide, please. So what we envisage with the European health data space is to promote this access to health data in a digital format. What we see right now that this is still lacking in many respects. Data is often available in paper, so not necessarily in a digital format, or perhaps some categories are available in a digital format, but others are not. And what we also see is that there is a large variety of the format in which the data is collected and stored. And this makes it quite difficult to use the data in different contexts. So therefore, it's important to promote interoperability. And lastly, what we see is that across the member states and the regions, there are a lot of different tools and infrastructures that are in place, which is fine if you never leave your region. But as soon as you leave your region, all of a sudden you are confronted with other tools and other infrastructure which you not necessarily can connect to, and you may be not able to access. And this could be a risk to the continuity of care, also for patients with rare diseases. Next slide, please. Also, what I mentioned is what's important is the secondary use of health data. So this would be where you reuse health data, for instance, for research or for policy making. So as you can see here, you already have on the right side of the image, you have the health data from patients and healthcare professionals. And of course, also patients can use mobile devices. And in this way, they can collect furthermore health data. And then it would be interesting to see which rules, which protocols, which governance should we put in place at the European level to make sure that in a safe manner, we can extract the value from this health data with the permission of the patient. And in this way, for instance, researchers could, for rare disease patients, reuse the health data to develop new diagnosis, new treatment, to obviously improve the healthcare. Next slide, please. Another aspect that we are looking at is the aspect of digital health services and products. So if you download a health app on your telephone, or if your GP or nurse recommends that you use a certain device and then collect the data to share it with your healthcare provider, then it would be useful if this is collected according to certain standards, and that you as a patient or as a healthcare provider can assess the quality of these products and services. So right now we have a CEN standard, CEN ISO standard, which is under review, and we will be working towards adoption and uptake of the standard to make sure that that we all have, like you see in the example here, some kind of easy, accessible way to determine the quality of these products. Next slide, please. And this is an example of how that's done already in one of the member states. In the member state of Belgium, there is a validation pyramid that they use to assess the quality of telehealth solutions. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you see that a certain solution is CE certified. And then the second part of the pyramid says that you can also safely connect the device to other systems. So for this example, you can then connect it to your own digital health dossier with the Belgian or the Flemish or the Wallonian government. And then the top of the pyramid is, of course, where the biggest value lies, because then you can say that the solution has been tested and they have proven that it has value for healthcare. People's health improves when you use this solution. And then the health insurers, they can also decide to reimburse the solution. Next slide, please. So to conclude, the European Commission works on these different priorities, so both for the care of rare disease patients and, of course, the digital transformation of healthcare. And it's important for us to align these efforts as much as possible. And this is also what we really like about the Share4Rare approach, it's putting the patient first. Because if you listen to the patient, if you have the patient-reported outcomes at the center of your work, then you can actually use the data that is most valuable. And that, of course, is whether the patient themselves can indicate whether their health has improved and whether their quality of life has improved. So this is, for us, a very important aspect also for the European health data space, to put the patients first, to empower these citizens to control the data and to be able to decide with whom they share the data. And then, of course, through all this research, innovation, and the collaboration with our partners, we can further strengthen and modernize the healthcare system in the EU for the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you very much, Hugo, for this presentation. I'm a bit blown away, and thank you for this Share4Rare, for connecting it with Share4Rare. And we're very happy to hear as well that putting the patient first will be one of the priorities as well for the European Commission. So together we can make, with all stakeholders, a meaningful impact on the health of all European citizens. So thank you for that, Hugo. I would like to invite all the participants again. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will make sure to answer them after 2 presentations. Because for now, I would like to hand over the floor again to Giliosa Spuri-Benar, because she will be talking about the project itself, because we were thinking about, because when we started the project, we might have completely different ideas about how this whole project would look like. And Gilly, you will present how we came up to these conclusions and insights.
Hi there again. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Suzanne. As part of the end event for this whole project, we wanted to carry out a design thinking workshop for the whole of the consortium, so all of us getting together. We were really delighted at MP&E that this was agreed by the consortium, because it's something that we've been involved in. You know, it's kind of an iterative approach that we've been using in advocacy for a very long time. You know, sort of iterating problem solutions, testing assumptions, measuring efficacy, adapting actions, with this always with this strict focus on patient benefit. And we've been using it to train our advocates. So it's a great process, and we were really lucky to have in our community Andy Evans, who's one of our members. He's happens to be a design thinking specialist, has been working in this for many years, and he's also a rare cancer patient, so it was kind of really fortuitous for us that we could benefit from his insight. Just to talk a little bit about the design thinking concept, which you know, because we are a consortium where we like to use tools that have already been developed and adapt them to our way of thinking. This was a kind of an ideal concept to help us with this final event. So, I mean, the design thinking concept, it sort of has this methodology where you ideally would meet all together and do this in real life, but with COVID, sadly, this isn't possible, and it's less rich because of that, but we think we've actually managed to come up with some quite good things. So design thinking, it has these 5 steps. So the first is to empathize, which is, and this, you know, it's important to listen openly and understand where the problems lie. And this is really where we understand what and for whom we're designing, really. And then there's a define stage, which it's the bit that takes us the longest. It certainly took us the longest in this workshop. What exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve? And have you identified it correctly? And then the next one is the ideate phase, which is really where we all had to think outside the box and try and come at it from a completely fresh angle, and come up with all the possible and impossible answers for our defined problem, really. Now, and then there's a prototype. Obviously, from that, you would go on to a prototype, and then you would test. And of course, Andy was kind enough to adapt a little bit how this would work in the sort of lean advocacy world to what we needed for this workshop. So you can see the sort of standard steps. You know, you can still recognize it as design thinking. and so we applied this thinking process to the whole project first, and then we adapted it to fit our aims for this workshop. So to reflect on the project as a whole with all the consortium partners, and we wanted to have something coming out at the end of it, which you can see is this sort of Share4Rare 2.0 ideal. You can see the darker colors is the actual workshop, emphasized, define, and ideate down the bottom. But before that, obviously, the same process had been done at the beginning of the project, with the user groups and all the processes that we've been through in the whole project. And then we got to we then got to the Share4Rare pilots, which is really our testing phase, if you like, our iteration of of what we'd come up with before, and then we were going to test those, and then from that we were going to go through this process. So you can see it's sort of a little bit complicated, this diagram, but it's the whole project plus the things we did in the workshop plus what we hope would be the future. We were working on Miro boards. Let me go on one step. We were working on Miro boards because obviously normally we would like to do this in person and have everybody there. We have a very diverse group of people, and we know that you get the best results out of the diverse groups, but at the same time you need some quite strict rules and management. So we went through this whole process. The overall project view with all the consortium members, we kept the same sort of style of design thinking as we've already talked about, but we also made sure that it was specific to this project. We did a thorough brainstorming to go through the. Let me just go back one, because you can see the numbers on the. You can see the numbers of the steps on the workshop, 1, 2, 3, which is what we covered. We did a thorough brainstorming at the beginning to be able to ideate, really. So, and we developed this mind map, which we will show you versions of, which was much more complex, but we have to protect people's general privacy in the process. So we'll only show you part of it, although the rest of it will be in the report. From our presence, let me go on one more. So this is the define stage of the exercise. So it was a brainstorming exercise, and all of these things, you can see a few of the topics that would come out: reducing isolation, visibility, empowering patient organizations. These were the things that came out with all the consortium members adding to this. Then the ideation stage. So what we came out of through all the whole process was these 4 essentials which we would need for Share4Rare 2.0. So the critical role of data management, technical, legal aspect, and privacy concerns, which is really good coming on from the previous speaker. We did have major issues with the privacy, and as someone from the French organization, and France is actually a country where their rules are actually stricter than GDPR, if that's possible. We really need, this is something that came out that we really need to try and address. And I know Loretta also referred to it at the beginning about people's trust in putting their data on platforms. So data management is absolutely one of the most important things that has come out of this process. Team diversity. We know it's great to be diverse. It's by far you get the best outcomes if you're diverse, but it would benefit, it really needs some specific methodology to manage it all. And you know, this has really high demands on the project management and on communication. That's another big one that we need to really keep going in this project. Balancing different value propositions. This is also critical. We know the differences that we have in value proposition between researchers, between patients, between patient organizations even, and those that are wanting to use the data outside. One thing also came up was this unexpected user group. This is undiagnosed patients came up as half of the patients on the platform. And this is a really it kind of took us by surprise, not just by the activity that was there, because you would expect people who are undiagnosed to have huge worries, but also how many of them there were. So bringing up this whole issue of the global health, European health data space. Oops, sorry, it's just gone back. We can see that we're in a rapidly evolving situation, and we need to have positions on it and need to be involved in that and bring what we've learned from Share4Rare and the development of Share4Rare into this. We also need to have this very heightened sensitivity with regard to data sharing, access and rights. Interoperability, obviously all the fair data principles that we need to that we're bringing from Share4Rare, we need to be applying in these new data spaces. Multi-stakeholder initiatives could benefit considerable from the methodology and expertise that we learn in something like this workshop. It's really helpful to iterate in a process like we've learned about. Also, we need to co-develop. This is vital, especially with the diverse consortium members that we have, and readjust multiple value propositions from the start all the way through, and keep going back to those at every point. And the last thing is, I think it's vital, we need a solution for the unmet need of these patients without a diagnosis. It's thrown it up again and again on the forums. We spent quite a lot of time on the forums, and we see this as a huge unmet need area. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Gilly, for this presentation. And it's great to know that we've just listed these learnings to make them tangible so we can build on that. And that is actually exactly what Begonia is going to talk about next. I'm inviting you, Begonia, to share your screen and to talk about how we can proceed to do rare disease research in this Share4Rare project using citizen science.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the colleagues that have explained a little bit different pieces about this very intensive and huge project. I will try to summarize 10 learned lessons, and also my colleague Anais from the SMA Clip Lab is going to also offer to you an overview about the future of the Share4Rare. These 10 lessons are, as you can imagine, very aligned with the explanation that my colleague Gilly has already done, and came from the work done with different communities of patients, with patients from different countries and with different needs. The first one that I want to highlight is about the importance of the co-creation with the patients. Share4Rare was co-created from the very beginning with different communities of patients. Here in this photo, you can see the participants of one of the co-creation workshops that we did at the very beginning. And I think that it's important to highlight that this is a very meaningful highlight of our project. It's a community, it's a platform addressed for the patients and created with the patients. And for us, and as you have seen also with the example of the melanoma research pilot that my colleague Bettina will explain, it's the way that we want to continue working. It involves the patients from the very beginning until the last part of the process, when we need to communicate the outcomes of any research initiative. Second point is empower the patients. You know that we have at the European level and also at the worldwide level very expert patients, but they are not the only kind of patients that we have, and everyone deserves the opportunity to contribute in research. It means that also it's part of our responsibility to educate and empower the patients. And for us, and in the Share4Rare project, we have done this empowerment into big important areas. One is the knowledge and the management of the disease. Previously, Suzanne have explained about the library. You have here a screenshot. We have many different medical books that explain to the patients in a very easy way, no, from the onset of the disease, the symptomatology, and if there are treatments at this moment approved for this condition. This content has been also reviewed and approved by boards of patients. But beyond this, something that is crucial and important for the community of patients, it's empower them in the advocacy field. And already also Suzanne explained about the importance of the toolkit for the patient advocacy that we have on Share4Rare. And it's important to spread the word about this toolkit and the different tools that are included them. For us, it's an asset, educate the patients in something that for us it's very common, but not everybody is aware about the rights and the role that the patients can have in research. As a third point, for us, an important learning has been the peer patient support in the community and in the people like me functionality that John has explained. We have there patients from different conditions, different countries, and different phenotypes. Altogether, they have the option to share information and interact in only one community. Traditionally, the communities of patients have been built by topics or by diseases, but using these algorithms of artificial intelligence and the model of only one community, we have demonstrated that there are many points and many needs that are common, and you don't need another patient living in your country with your same diagnosis to help you. Probably there is another patient from another country with another condition that probably can help you. And we want to facilitate this very open and global opportunity of interaction. Third point is the cultural boundaries. Gilly has already explained about the strong issues about data in France. There are many cultural and language boundaries that we need to know and to deal, because even Europe is a big environment and we have many common rules. There are no specific aspects, country-based and language-based, that we need to consider. And this is a learning that has facilitated to us to adapt and to design the last projects that we have included in the platform. Beyond this, I think that it's an asset, this cultural diversity, and it's something that always is relevant in terms of research. 5 point, quality of life. Obviously, we can request to the patient's clinical data and medical information, but this information probably already it's collected in the health records of the hospitals. But something that for us it's very important, and nowadays in some projects it's the secondary outcome, it's the information about the quality of life of the patients. Because at the end, beyond to improve the biological aspects of the disease, we want to do it in the best way to impact the less in the quality of life of the patients. And regarding this topic, we envision for the future development of the Share4Rare mainly focus working in the patient-reported outcomes measures field. The involvement of the patients' organizations. This is a project, as led by a hospital. We have a very strong connection with the different patients' organizations working in Spain at the European level. But we are one hospital in a big ecosystem. For us, a key aspect to move forward with the Share4Rare project and to include other research initiatives, it's to work hand by hand with other patients' organizations and other hospitals. For us, it's a great tandem, and we have demonstrated in part of the projects that we have, and this is the model that we want to continue replicate. The patients' organizations also have a profile in the platform. This was an improvement included in the second part of the project, because it facilitates them to contact and to support the patients, because our data, the data that we have analyzed, said that only every 2 patients are members of a patient organization. Still, we need to facilitate these connections, and obviously the help and the great work that the patients' organizations are doing. The point number 7, I want to highlight something about the ultra-rare conditions, because when we refer about rare diseases, we have obviously a very different conditions there in terms of prevalence. And there is a group of the ultra-rare conditions that it's very specific. Not always they have a patient organization working there. The knowledge that we have about these conditions, it's very limited. The resources and the investment, you know, from the private side, also it's limited. And for us, it's a priority to take care about these ultra-rare conditions because it's part of the social responsibility of the academic institutions, the public health systems, and in general the society to facilitate the equity access to research. And in Share4Rare also, we are working with these ultra-rare conditions, and we think that it's an asset to include them and their specificities. As I have said, the collaboration with the clinicians is a key point. So in some projects, the leaders can be the patient organizations, in others can be the clinicians, but at the end, at any point in the phase to analyze this information, to generate knowledge and hopefully promote future projects, the clinicians and the academic institutions need to be there. Point number 9, it's connected with all the information that Hugo from the European Commission have explained this afternoon to all of you. It's about the health data. And for us, it's very important to work in the literacy field. Not everybody knows about the rights of the data. Not everybody knows about how they can use these rights and about the importance in our society to donate this health data or health information to increase science. And here, something that it's crucial, it's obviously to add on top of the opportunity to share this data, to work together at the European level or international level in the analysis of the information that at the end we can interchange and share. And last point is that we think that platforms such as the Share4Rare facilitates this European collaborative ecosystem where there are the patients, where there are the caregivers, the patients' organizations, and many other stakeholders. At the end, science can move forward, obviously having in their heart the role of the patients, but obviously we need the other stakeholders working hand by hand with us. And in most of the projects that we have at this moment working on Share4Rare, we have tried to involve the different stakeholders, to facilitate that this knowledge, this information, and any activity that can be performed in this digital world can arrive, to the different countries. And the picture that John showed you at the very beginning about the worldwide map, in fact, it's an evidence about the impact of Share4Rare beyond the European ecosystem. But for us, it's a priority, obviously, to have liaisons and future collaborations with the different stakeholders that are working in the field of rare diseases at the European level. And now let's move about the topic of the future, and this part is going to be covered by Anais. I can manage the slides if you want.
Thank you. I don't know if you see me. Do you hear me okay? Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. So thank you, Begonia. Thank you everyone for being here and listening. Just say a quick continuation of what you just said, Begonia, about the future. So on the next slide, in the project obviously is ending in the next few weeks, but let's say the project, that funding received by the European Commission, but the project will keep on going. And the platform, let's say the main findings, the main advances, we will keep on working on it. So I guess the key aspects of that future is obviously what Begonia has just mentioned a few moments ago about the close collaboration with the POs. It's essential to continue to link with patient organization to push this platform. In relation to that, there will be this Share4Rare call for projects that you can see here, and there will be, so it's open in the deadline on July 15th. So to keep on this patient-driven research project is very important for the platform and to showcase what we've been doing so far. And then also, as Begonia mentioned, the patient reported outcome measure. So this is what some of the part we're going to work on. Maybe the next slide. And I think in terms of sustainability and continuity of the platform, obviously, one of the key aspects is the cooperation with the ERNs. So thanks very much, Hugo, for your presentation. I think we are in line with a lot of the things that have been mentioned. We want to keep on working with the ERN. We had one through Newcastle on board in this project, and hopefully we are working on connecting further with the others to ensure that patient-driven approach towards research, toward data management. So we think that's absolutely key in the future. Again, as it says here, to support the data-driven patient projects. And I would go in some of the things that we have done and currently working for the future, relation with bigger projects that not necessarily are just in rare diseases. So we can't say too much about it because it's in negotiation for now, but it will be also in the report, especially in the IMI. And then on the private side, we're also in touch with different stakeholders, obviously from the commission, but just yesterday, actually, there was a very interesting webinar on data from patients, but most of the speakers were from either the industry or other, let's say, bigger corporation or entities. And so it's important through Share4Rare to insist and to continue pushing from, let's say, the patient side of things and to ensure that their data are safe and that contribute to research. So that's where we are heading. Thank you, Begonia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Anais. And before to finish this part of this agenda, let me share my screen because we want to share with all of you a video that summarizes how Share4Rare works.
In Europe alone, over 30 million people are affected by rare diseases. 80% of them are children. Often these patients and their families face daily challenges alone and with limited information. Realizing one is not alone in the struggle can lighten the burden. Share4Rare is a collaborative project where everyone matters. Patients, carers, researchers, clinicians, each with a unique perspective and valuable insights, which we explore and capture using surveys designed by experts. Our goal is to bring everyone together on a global platform to advance research in rare diseases. That is why our patients and carers play a crucial part in our research projects. Their expertise is our guideline. We strongly believe that collective intelligence can lead to solid advancements over individual efforts. Share4Rare is an online safe space to connect, share knowledge, and support each other. Users from over 50 countries are already active on our global forum and interact with each other. We look for similarities to connect patients and families living with rare diseases. This could be a shared condition, similar symptoms, or because they live in the same country. Share4Rare uses artificial intelligence and bespoke algorithms to build meaningful connections from the information users provide. Because nobody should be in this alone. Quality information is vital, and unfortunately, for many rare diseases, it is often in short supply. Our teams of experts, doctors, and patients publish blogs and medical chapters to disseminate knowledge and expertise. Share4Rare is designed to facilitate research to build new knowledge and understanding by engaging with patients directly. In turn, the fruits of this research will be shared through the platform. From specific symptoms to cross-cutting issues, we want to share what we know. And we want to keep learning so we can also share what we find out. Our ambition is to make sharing as easy as possible so that patients can benefit. Together, we can make a difference in rare diseases. Get on board.
Thank you very much, Begonia and Anais, for setting the path for future rare disease research powered by patients. Now, regardless whether it will be under the hat of Share4Rare or another project, I think I'm speaking on behalf of the full consortium and say we are proud of what we established and we are looking forward to what happens next. So now we've arrived to the single part, last thing of this webinar, which will be the Q&A. Now, I already saw some questions and answers popping up in the chat. Thank you for that. I would like to mention that we cannot provide any personal medical advice. The questions and answers are usually for the presenters and the project themselves. And Hugo, I already saw some questions that you've answered in person, but it would be good to pull them up. And I think one of them is about the unique identifier. So Hugo, I will just read up the question. It says, we are all facing the issues of a unique identifier for our patients. Can you please update us where we stand currently, given that some technologies like UPID have still issues?
Yeah, so that's absolutely a very good question, and you can see that so the GDPR legislation is still quite young, right? So in that respect, also the solutions that are being developed to fall within the remit of the GDPR are also quite young. One example is UPID. So the European Commission, my colleagues in GRC, they have developed the UPID solution. Together with an Austrian institute, but after some testing, we discovered that this solution too, doesn't necessarily 100% provide all the solutions, isn't necessarily safe. So what you see also is that the rules are different in member states when it comes to the unique identifier. So in some countries you can use it in certain contexts, whereas in the next country you cannot. And then if you do have a solution, then you have different people looking at the solution, and all of a sudden you find out that it, isn't up to scratch. So these are issues that we constantly have to be vigilant about. All of us, it's a responsibility that we share. And also, if you look at the solutions that are being developed in the open source community, which I always find very inspiring. The open source community is all these software developers who, a lot of them, well, for free, write the code, help develop these solutions. And because it's open and transparent, you can also see whether it's safe or not. So I think we can learn a lot from the open source community. I think we should collaborate with them more often. To find solutions that are durable and where we can, together with all these different stakeholders, make sure that the solutions, stand the test of time, as it were.
Thank you very much, Hugo. I have another question that's also directed to you. Now we're at you, Hugo, and that is: does the GDPR really stimulate organizations to anonymize data? Well, actually, in most of the health data, it would be best to use pseudo-anonymization, which allows researchers to get back to patients in case of any relevant findings. How do we get better at this?
Well, so indeed, if you look at the ways that you can, abide by the GDPR, then one of the safest things you can do is to anonymize. But at the same time, then you close a lot of doors, right? So then the future value of all the research findings could be potentially quite limited. And at the same time, again, the GDPR is still young, and all the techniques that are being developed are also still quite young. But if you talk to legal experts, and if you are creative with the solutions that are out there, actually you can find within the GDPR quite some space to pseudonymize. And to still fall within the GDPR, and of course also all your national or regional legislation, which too, if you look at the GDPR, it was supposed to provide across the EU clarity and a single piece of legislation, but the implementation across the member states, it still varies. What I'll also do in the chat, I'll drop a link to a study that we've carried out as European Commission. We've looked at how the GDPR has been implemented across the member states, and what is and what is not possible with health data across the EU. Because you'll find it is still quite fragmented, and this reinforces the need for the European health data space. Because unless the EU acts, you will see that still we have currently hundreds of European health data spaces. And this is quite a problem for patients because patients are mobile, right? So they travel and they migrate. And then all of a sudden, you no longer have the rights that you had in the previous territory that you resided in. So this is a challenge that we need to address at the European level.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for answering this question. I'd like to move on to another question that we received, and that is, what resources should a patient organization need to have to be able to drive a research project in Share4Rare? What is the process and what are the resources needed? Who would like to answer that question?
I'm happy to take that one. While I would ask Bigo to put the link to the call maybe in the chat, because the call is just open. So I think people can just like go directly to the website and see whether they're keen to apply there. So what we have been trying, as I said earlier on, is we have been documenting the steps that we have undergone and have tried to turn them into protocols to make it easier for everyone who comes after us to hopefully take this on board. So everything depends very much on where you are in the process yourself. I don't know whether I can, let me see whether I find my presentation that fast. I'm happy to reshare the screen if that's possible, Suzanne, so that I can explain because it's quite a bit of detail. So it's, let me just make this big. So it depends a little bit on where you are, whether you, for example, have already a concrete research question and know exactly what you want to do, or whether you are still at the stage where you think we have this problem and I'd somehow like to do something about it, but how do I get started? So everything depends a bit where you are. Some people already come with a research tool that's very concrete, a survey that's designed where you just basically want to implement it. So the first thing is like to see where you fit in this over thing. That's the start. That's the first bit. And that depends here. So that's why we said we think we need something like, you know, like an interview or to discuss where people are in the process. Very concretely, what a step involves. So once you have defined your problem you're trying to solve and have designed your research project, so I think this is what I want to do. This is the problem I try to tackle. This is how I will do it. So I have a survey and you have written this survey, or I have gotten help how to write a survey. How the process would go is, because what is very important, especially when you first, I think for oneself, if you're a patient organization, you don't want to cause anyone in your community harm. And unfortunately, it's really easy to do that because sometimes things that we don't consider harmful can cause harm by, for example, asking questions in an upsetting way or collecting data in a way that can compromise or be risk for a patient. That's why having an ethics committee going over it is really helpful. So this will be done by the ethics committee and Sandran, and we have translated the ethics form submission for that. So it's a form you fill in, and actually I think it's a really helpful process because it gets you to think about your own project. That then gets submitted, and once you have the get to go comes the technical implementation. Then it very much depends on which language you would like to run this in. So we have now translated the research feature into French and Romanian on top, and we deliberately chose these languages because we know from our previous work in our own community that especially the French community does not like to answer surveys in English. So every time we put something out in English, we get an overproportional representation of UK and Irish patients, and we miss entire countries. And that, of course, gives you a skewed image of your community, and we didn't want that. So we picked French. And because we wanted to have also some geography or geographic balance and wanted to evaluate whether there are differences in approach, we chose Romanian for a Middle European from the CE community. And it's also languages we speak ourselves because we didn't know how much work it would be, and we didn't want to put this on volunteers first. So we can tell you, there is a format which is an Excel sheet that contains all the strings of the platform that you can translate. If one person does it uninterruptedly, it takes you between 1.5 and 2 days. You could, of course, crowdsource it. So do it with 3, 4, 5 people. bearing in mind, and we have done that as well, the more people you use, it's less work per person, but you have to plan for the organization. The survey we have run is a 3-part survey. One of them is a validated tool. It's called the MiniMac. It tests the mental adjustment to cancer. We used the 29-item scale and we crowd translated it. You can't just translate a tool into another language. That's not, because you introduce bias. So there are protocols how to translate from, let's say, English into the next language. For example, what you do is you have to translate it independently by a number of different people. And then you have to compare the translations to make sure that no one has misunderstood something. Then you will back translate to the original. And then you need to adjust for cultural components. We have done this in our network last summer, and we have actually translated this MiniMac into how many languages? I think we are now at 22 languages. In parallel, we have gotten 5 independent translations per MiniMac. And that we've organized actually via Google Sheets, Google Form, Google Sheets, but you have to put quite some time and thinking into how you crowdsource this. So that's something to bear in mind. You reduce the burden on a single person, but you increase the organizational thought process about it. We thought it was a fascinating process on the cultural translation, because there was, in the MiniMac, there is one question that really triggered so many people. It said, I lay my life in the hands of God. And that question, that was dynamite. So in France, that was an impossible question to ask, because people were really offended that someone would ask them about their religion. Finland was another country that was really had a really strong, visceral reaction against it. So in other countries, that question caused nothing, but there were other questions that triggered responses. So one has to be sensitive to these things. So to give you a flavor, it depends a little bit what your survey looks like. Once you have done that, it will take quite some IT work, and it requires, in our experience, quite some user testing. So in order to make sure that the entire process is smooth, and there are some things that we need to address for the next version. But it is like very much depending on how much time you're willing to put in. But now, the nice thing about it is that we have created templates, for example, for the landing page. So it's just a PowerPoint slide, and you can design it the way you want it to look like. And so in an ideal setting in the future, and we're not quite there yet, because it was, how it sounded so easy when we started, and then you realize how much work goes into it. In the future, my idea would be that there was a toolkit one can just work through and be done with that. But my ambition would be that it is relative, that the financing is not an issue. So first, I would invite you to test, to apply for the call and participate there. Because of course, as patient organization, we all know money is always, we don't have so much of it, and anything we can do crowdsourced or by helping each other will make all our communities move faster. And the cost shouldn't be prohibitive for any of us. So I hope that answered your question. Otherwise, I'm always happy, drop me an email. I'm happy to talk more about it.
I really hope that answers your question. And thank you, Bettina. And was it like just out of the blue that you had this slide ready, or did you already read the question? You were like,
No, that was on my presentation earlier on, but I walked quite quickly through it because I didn't want to, go over time. But if it's helpful, I mean, of course, we have spent thought on it, and that's the whole point of developing it. So I would be, happy to. I can talk about it for other hours if you let me. So I won't.
No worries. I'm very, very happy that you explained this, because we got a question about it. So anyway, thank you, Bettina. Now, I'm just keeping an eye on the questions and answers and on the chat, and I don't think we have any unanswered questions. I see, oh wait, there is a translated question, and it says here that we have a question if Google Forms is the right tool to get data from patients. Good question. Who will answer it?
Well, I can tell you because we've used it in the past, and I can tell you what the issues are, right? Okay, so back in the past, before GDPR really came, Google kept the data all over the place. And we only started using it after it was made compulsory that the data would be held in Europe under GDPR rules. So that is the moment when we started using Google for our work in our patient organization. So we're not, and that is just for any type most of the stuff we're doing is we organize patient conferences, and we always ask people, of course, their personal details. If you want to make a hotel booking for someone, you need at least the name. We also ask them about their relationship to the disease and some stuff, for example, like which stage they are, because that helps us to make programs that are really valuable to them, because otherwise you can be totally off, and with that then there's no point. But that's of course sensitive information. So that's why we pay attention to it. However, and that's something that really tripped us up, if you want to do research on it, the first thing is people will always say, oh, you're just a patient organization. So how do you know that the people who answer your survey are really who they say they are? And we have no way to validate that. And of course, you can imagine if you want to submit something to a healthcare decision maker, so someone like an HTA, so Health Technology Assessment Body, or regulatory agencies, they pay a lot of attention. So having a way to validate the people who answer your questions is really important, and something that adds value and solidity to any type of research. To be honest, necessarily, I wouldn't do this for something simple. If it was something harmless, that wouldn't, I think in proportion for the effort. But if it's something you really want to be certain and sure, and also if you're very interested in publishing it, publishers will ask for an ethics approval. So I think undergoing this entire ethics approval is a really valuable part of it as well. So, we can do lots of, anyone can do a survey, but I think the art is to do one that has a high quality, that is solid in the tool, and has an analysis that really informs your work and what you're trying to do, and that you quality control for it. And that is what we've been trying to achieve with this research feature.
All right, thanks very much, Bettina. Hugo, from a technical point of view, what is for you the thresholds and the triggers for the trying to validate the information that you look for?
Right, so I'm trying to understand this question. So I don't know if the person asking this question could elaborate just a bit more.
I think one question that I think there is this thing that we all have, is that how do you validate the data that you're collecting? And I think this is the question that we like to have answered.
Sorry, I just got a call which I had to press away. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What is the best way to validate data that you're collecting?
Well, so generally speaking, not knowing the context of the question, so this goes into data quality. And this is quite, well, I would say this is one of the major concerns when you're using health data, right? So because as we say in IT, garbage in is still garbage out. So the validity of your data would depend on a number of factors. Obviously, you need to find out whether the data is reliable. So what kind of measures are you taking to safeguard the quality? But also, what is the purpose that you want to use the data for? Because if you have collected the health data for the purpose of maybe something in the context of rare cancers, but then you want to reuse the health data for another purpose, then all of a sudden probably you need to start asking some very difficult questions to determine whether this is fit for purpose, right? So it sounds, the validity of data, it sounds like a very easy question to ask, but really it's quite complex to answer. So it depends very much so on the context where you want to use the data. It also depends on what the quality criteria are, because if you're going to use it for diagnosis, then probably your quality criteria need to be very high and need to be accepted in your scientific community. So without knowing much more about the context of the question, I hope this is a sufficient answer.
Thank you very much. And it's indeed the fact that it's such a multifaceted thing, validation of data, that I think this is a tough cookie to crack. Thank you, Hugo. Now I'd like to move on to the last part of this end event, which is the panel discussion, in which we invite people from all our consortium groups and institutions to open their webcam. And I would like to also introduce the moderator of the panel discussion. His name is Dimitris Athanasiou. He's a board member of the World Duchenne Organization, and he'll be leading this part. Dimitris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. As a disclaimer, there is a new baby in the house, so if you hear screams, it's not nothing to worry about. I will just mute. I want to start by a high level saying that, as Loretta said, this project came much early, let's say, of its season, when the sharing of data was attractive, when research by patients was a concept. And I remember the days and the nights that we tried to design this project, how challenging it was in the beginning, especially of how we can persuade every stakeholder that, you know, sharing is good and you can build the trust between the partners. So my first question, and Begonia, you are not wearing your hospital hat, you are wearing your patient advocate hat. How difficult it was for you, you know, persuade a very innovative and advanced, let's say, organization as your hospital, that, you know, sharing is okay, sharing with patients, sharing with technological partners, but having the patient drive in the center. How difficult it was, you know, to persuade in this early days.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dimitris, for the question. I want to mention that the concept and the idea of this project came from a specific unit of our hospital. It's the innovation department. You know, not all the pediatric hospitals sometimes have a department working in innovation, and also came from the learnings of a previous project. It was quite easy in our institution to convince, you know, the people that are taking decisions about to move forward with a project, based on data and based in an active role of the patients. Also, our institution has a department fully dedicated and fully devoted to ensure the involvement of the patients in research. It seems easy, but it's challenging, both ways, involve the patients in research and the data donation. In our environment, it was easy, but you know, not every house it's the same, not every hospital it's the same. And here, something that we have learned a lot, and it's part of my list of the 10 lessons learned in this project, is that our cultural and country boundaries and education and empowering, for me, it's the most important investment that we can do before to have an active role with the patients. And I think that it's a lesson, and it's probably a responsibility of all of us. And also I'm encouraging the colleagues from the European Commission to help on this, to educate the citizens and to work towards the health literacy in this field. Because not everybody in general in the society, the patients or the caregivers are aware about what means data donation and what are the opportunities that are behind.
Thank you very much, Begonia. I think this is very true, and I remember the discussion when you move from the innovation, let's say, department to the legal department, how this can be more challenging, let's say, when we are talking about data management plans, etc. I want to pass to the patients, Bettina, and I mean, from our experience in rare diseases, isolation and fragmentation of data is a nightmare. And if you want to ask your patient to share the data or to even do something, and I can take examples from neuromuscular. So SMA1, you have a life expectancy of your children of 2 years. The disability is severe in almost all neuromuscular. And then on top of your care, you have to work and to do something with the data of your child to donate it in order to develop research. It's not an easy equation for any community, depends on how well organized it is. But passing on the other side, Bettina, in melanoma, that time is also a very precious, let's say, commodity. What is the experience? What were the challenges and the learnings that you had when you try to convince, let's say, your community that this is important?
Well, I think the first thing is to get your hands onto your own data. I mean, everyone says patient sharing data. I mean, first you have to have something to share. I mean, just like lots of people are actually, everyone thinks as a patient, you just show up your hospital and say, give me your data, and you get your data. You mean, wake up, folks. I mean, the story is just like the things that our people are told. I mean, just like forums are full of it. They get told something that the hospital owns the data, that the physician owns the data, that they have to ask someone else whether they're allowed to share the data. So that's reality. So we all talk about sharing, but there's nothing to share. Let's face that. So that's why we as patient community are super keen on to follow like the FHIR standards in the US and what Medicaid and Medicare are doing, where patients actually have a trigger. I mean, that's my idea. You push a trigger without having to, and that is actually something that upsets me personally, is that you as patient are pushed in a confrontation with your treating team, that it is your right to have your data, but they make you feel as if you were asking for something to which you are not entitled. And then people will just kind of shy back from the confrontation because they need the medical team to take care of them. And that undermines a lot actually of, you know, it is your right, but just to have your right, you have to fight. So something that would allow a patient to request the data with avoiding that confrontation would be a big first step. Then in terms of thinking about this, it's just like, so this is actually where our community struggles. In a cancer community, it's often asking for a second opinion, where you would want to have your file on you and not necessarily tell your first oncologist, because that then gets perceived as mistrust. So that is where we started getting into this topic. On the research side, it is especially our rare melanoma colleagues who are desperate for it. And actually, I think something that we will have to look into is data sharing with China. So I'm a member of IC2PERMED, which is Personalized Medicine Initiative between China and the EU, but we have one type of melanoma, which is called mucosal melanoma, starting in the inner linings of the body, which is very frequent. Well, I'm not sure it's frequent, but the numbers of patients are very high in China. It might be a proportion because they have less cutaneous melanoma, but there are many patients in China. So our people are going through these publications, desperately trying to look for solutions. If we really want progress, we'll have to find a way how to learn together. That's why I very much like this approach that we have to think globally when it comes to rare. So, I think we're a long way off. We heard already about the need for data standards and completeness and data quality and protocols, which is a lot of tedious, boring, but critical work. But I think the scale is something we also have to keep in mind. I mean, people are coming all the time and you can just say, I have no idea how to even start about this. So I think, but I agree with you, we are at the beginning and the project was early. I think the discussion, if you listen to the discussion now, we're in a different world. I mean, so much has moved in 4 years. We go like, wow, I hope that was what you were asking.
I think you're very right, because I remember when we tried to have our first, let's say, TCs and dissemination and communication with other partners. 3 years ago, it was really trying to explain the unexplainable when you're discussing that I want to have research driven by patient. I mean, it was an experience, but things are moving. And one reason that things are moving, and I want to pass to our technical partners that did an amazing job, and I want to thank them for the tolerance when we try to change everything continuously throughout the project. So John, Inma, Alex, can you maybe give us your perspective? Especially, we know that Share4Rare, the algorithm itself, started from a different model, and eventually, with all this, let's say, interaction, it evolved to a very innovative tool that can actually help even diagnose. Because if you are matching the effects of the disease, you can match them to groups, you can bring them closer to disease areas. How do you solve this evolution? And do you see the technical evolution in the open, let's say, space of data, the new data sets that are, let's say, collected, and the efforts that of the new health policy is involving in this area? Is this going to help you or create you more troubles, let's say, in Share4Rare, but also beyond? And I don't know who wants to pick it up, John, Inma, Alex, whoever.
Well, I'm not talking about the data because this is Alex's field, but for us in Amada, we are experts in technologies applied to the health field. So we all know that humanizing technology and putting it at patient service is still a pending task. So being able to work closely with rare disease patient association and the patient family and families themselves has helped us to have a better understanding to their needs and has changed a lot our perspective. And well, technology speaking, the most interesting part of the project has been developing the research tool. And well, we believe that technology has a key role facilitating research. And well, we know that there is a long way to go and many challenges ahead, such as improving patient engagement, that's a good one, and reaching interoperability between platforms, sharing data. It's the great challenge here. So I think you has show us the path, and we are there now. We will want to have another 4 years to do more and more research. So we are so grateful for you, for your patience, for your generosity sharing with us. And for us as technologists, it has been a privilege to be part of this.
Thank you, Inma. John?
Yes, thanks, Dimitrios. Well, regarding the challenges I foresee with the new data policies and the way in which, fair data directives, let's say, or initiatives are reshaping the data space, especially in Europe, but probably worldwide in the short term. I think that, as I have said, it is no doubt it is a challenge, but it is also a great opportunity. It is a big opportunity because it will allow to integrate different data sets from all over Europe on the first place, but potentially all over the world. And that will no doubt help in an enormous way, or it will be an enormous boost to research, and it will be a big opportunity to create and to build new tools and new ways to help patients and diagnose patients and otherwise diagnose patients and patients groups in different prevalence groups, let's say, or prevalence diseases. So, and then speaking for Share4Rare in particular, we believe that it is the way to proceed. No doubt, trying to integrate it with other initiatives, starting maybe with some way of making it interoperable with other research initiatives at the European level, maybe ERNs, European Reference Networks, patient organizations, and so on, such that all those sub-ecosystems, let's say, in the bigger ecosystem of rare diseases can be integrated in a meaningful and effective way. It will be a lot of work, and it will require a close collaboration and meeting specifications in many levels, at the patient level, at the level of the different organizations. But we as UPC, I think that we have learned in this project to do that with you and your help, of course, and the help of all the partners in the project. So yeah, that is my point about the matter. I don't know if Alex has something to add about this. Thank you.
Hi all. Sorry for being late, but I had other big compromises today. But yeah, maybe just to add very, very shortly to what John said, I think that from our side in Share4Rare, we came up with this idea of data equity, in which the patient it should receive back all the value that the data is actually providing into the platform, and maybe that's a driving force in Share4Rare. It's sharing because you also receive from the platform. And we try to back this up using an AI system, which is doing some clever data analysis from the patients. But I'm sure that this is just the beginning. It's the very first stone on how to do this. And I think that there is a long road to drive through in this path. And also with the other cornerstone in Share4Rare, which is trying to deep phenotyping in rare diseases, which I think it's key in this kind of project. So, and also we use deep phenotyping to an extent in Share4Rare, but we have to push harder in this kind of projects as a community to help the rare disease community at the end. That's everything from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think you elaborated very well that, we started from co-creation and social involvement to a very sharp blueprint of how you can do the research and in a very innovative way. And I'm passing to Anais, because Anais, for us, and I'm sure for patient organizations, and I'm sure also for the hospitals involved, Share4Rare, when we started, we thought, it can happen, it might not happen. Let's go for it. And at the end, we have a functional blueprint, and that's why we passionately support it, that you can actually do this. It's a state of art. It's a proof of concept. How do you see the other stakeholders when you are responsible for the sustainability, you are responsible for the future? As Suzanne said, this is the end of this cycle of Share4Rare. It's not the end of the project. How do you see this buy-in from other stakeholders?
Sorry, the noise was not in this case my baby, but is only 15 years old, so it just different kind of issues you can get. So anyways, Dimitrios, thank you for the question. I must say it was and I still think after so many years, so many issues, challenges, because it was not an easy one. I think maybe we even were a little bit over ambitious at the beginning, as most of you said. This dream of data sharing and data being held by the patient a few years ago was something completely, it was not there on the table. It is now. But now the main issue and the most important, I think, is to get connected. We cannot work on our own. This is something, obviously, to work all together from very different type of backgrounds, entities, and so on was a challenge. It's a social innovation project, what we do also in my company now, and I also talk for Acerta. So it was not easy. It's not easy still, but I think this is how it has to go. We need to be as patient, and I think Bettina obviously made a clear allegato in favor of the patient, but that's true. And becoming a patient, also you understand that your data is not in your hands, and this is something that absolutely needs to change. So yes, we're in connection with the European Commission, different initiatives. As I said yesterday, it was very interesting to listen to a panel about clinical data and so on. And around the table, you can only hear pretty much industry, pharma, some commission representatives, but the patients in their very different community were not so represented. So there's a long way to go, but definitely I think the connection with other initiatives, the keep the work, the pushing that patients should have a hold on their data. I mean, we all are in a moment of life a patient, and you want to have that. So yeah, definitely a challenging project, but still absolutely convinced that this kind of initiative is absolutely necessary to pave the way for the future.
Thank you very much, Anais. And before I pass to Begonia and Suzanne, maybe a very big thanks to Hugo, that you really work hard for your money, and we have you here in the panel, Hugo. Thank you so much. And for Loretta, that supported us all the way, and we really appreciate it. Bego, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It has been, I think, a nice journey this afternoon, across the different key pieces of the project. The toolkit for advocacy, the tool that the colleagues from the Melanoma European Network created to design and validate educational material for patients, the topic about the data that is the cross-cutting about all the activities that we do in Share4Rare, the education and the empowerment of the patients. I think that these different pieces are part of a big puzzle that it's this new future that I think that we are building, aligned with the future, Europe, based in this opportunity to share data, share information, collaboration, because I think that the matter here it's collaboration, trust, because the data it's from the patients, but at the end who is managing this data are institutions that are hospitals, academic institutions, and we need to build this awareness and this education in terms of trust across Europe. I am going to be very short, but obviously it's a time to thank you, many different people. First of all, obviously the European Commission that it's represented this afternoon by Loretta and Ania, because thanks to the opportunity to submit this project to the European Commission 3.5 years ago, we started this project. Obviously, all the partners of the consortium, this very diverse consortium from the different perspectives, expertise, knowledge, capabilities, countries, dreams, challenges. I think that this mix at the end, it's the result, it's innovation. When you add different kind of expertise, you have a lot of capabilities to move forward. But my last thank you, obviously, it's for the patients and the families that have been involved along the project and nowadays are involved in the different initiatives. Hopefully, we had more time and more resources to build new projects. This is the challenge that we have now in front of us. A first opportunity to this call for projects that we have introduced this afternoon. Here from the San Juan de Déu Research Foundation, we want to help to continue with the project, and also part of the resources to move forward these projects are provided by our institution. But in any case, beyond the resources, what we need is the patients, their trust, and their interest to move forward research. And we can put plenty of resources, plenty of time, and the capabilities of many experts, but without the patients, this kind of projects cannot move forward. And this is my last word. A big thank you to all the patients, families, and patients organizations that are behind this project now, and hopefully in the future we can build a bigger family. Thank you so much.